Hi, good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, May 15th. It's 5:30 p.m. We are at the district office. This is a meeting of the committee meeting. No, it's
Curriculum.
the curriculum and evaluation committee. My name is Mr. Kaufman. Dr. Moritaki, the chair, is not going to be here tonight, so he asked me to sit and kind of run the meeting tonight. So let me start off by taking attendance. Mr. Kaufman is here. Ms. Van Twyver is not here. We think she may be coming. Ms. Hohensee is the alternate, and she is here. Also attending, Mr. Boucher, Mr. Fredricksen is, when Dr. Brown comes in, also attending from the board, Mrs. Zine, and also from our board, Cam, our student representative. Are you from North or South?
South.
South. McIntyre, right?
Yep.
And Sarah, I apologize, I forgot your last name.
Oh, Mirandos.
Mirandos and Mr. Farrington. I know it looks like we're really not paying attention, but we are. We just have to write our notes. And Mr. Farrington. Did someone start the tape? Oh, good. Thank you. So the first thing on our agenda tonight is the career pathways. I spoke with Mr. Boucher, and we agreed that we would accept the information from Ms. Meager and put it on file for the district. These are the career pathway plans. These, and correct me if I say something that's in error, Mr. Boucher. There are essentially 16 career pathways acknowledged, recognized, promoted, and otherwise supported by the federal government. And these are essentially the pathways that people can get work. They see these as the larger industrial focuses around that people work in. So one of them is agriculture, food, natural resources, architecture, and construction. I'm not going to go through these all, but just to give you a feel. Business management and administration, education and training, government, I skipped one, government and public administration, hospitality and tourism. I'm sure healthcare is in here, marketing and sales. Ms. Van Twyver has just joined us. Thank you. So when we look at, say, our CTE programs and our career and vocational programs, this is the kind of information we need to ensure that our students are oriented, their coursework is oriented toward fulfilling the needs of those industries. So, and that's what these things do. So they are scope and sequence, what we call a progression of learning, and their recommendations. These are all course requirements for this to fulfill. Is there a requirement at the end of?
It's more, not all requirements, more a pathway than requirement.
So if a student, if I may, so if a student is interested in, say, a career path, in the first one in front of me here is agriculture, food, and natural resources. The educational system essentially makes a recommendation. If you want to go into that line of business, you want to work in there, pursue academics, or if it's a vocation, we recommend that you follow this sequence of courses. So there's courses that are outlined for each of the high school. We're talking about 9th, 10th, and 11th grades. And they're categorized by different things. We're not going to get into the detail tonight. So this is an extensive amount of information. It's used to help students who've got an idea of what their choice of career might be to follow a set of courses that will help prepare them and get them there. And so that's the content of this instruction. So I would be willing to accept a motion to accept and put on record, put
I would
on
like
file.
to accept and put it on file this career pathways sequence as presented to the committee. Second.
Thank you. further discussion?
Just want to take a moment to thank Karen Marr for her hard work on this. Karen is moving on to a different position in the district, and she worked very hard to get this done before the end of the school year, so we appreciate that.
Yes, and thank you so much, and I wish you success, and I don't know where you're going in the district, but I'm glad you're here and still working on our behalf. So, shall we have a vote? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll say yes, too. Okay, thank you. That's our first order of business. The next order of business, competency-based grading. Let me just share with you some notes I have from a conversation I had with Dr. Murataki. One of his strong concerns around competency grading is that we have one system of grading that is top to bottom, from the high schools all the way down to the elementary school. So if it's competency grading, or if it's 100-point scale, or whatever it is, it's the same. There's one grading system. But one of the things, and I'm just looking at my notes because I want to share his comments, not only that there be one grading system, but that, and this I thought was very, very interesting to me, that it was one that will empower students to work hard and improve their grades. And to pursue this, Dr. Murataki would like to suggest that we have another grading survey, be conducted in the high school. As you can see, the topic is very general. There's not a lot of detail. I don't have a specific motion around competency grading myself. Mrs. Ziem, did you have any comment?
Do we have a copy of the old survey?
I have the scores for the old survey. We had 54% of our teachers favored the traditional grading system, 92% of our students favored it, and 83% of our parents favored the traditional grading system. And that was done about April or May of 2016.
It's a year ago.
Mrs. Hohendy, would you repeat that 54% was
And
what?
could you speak up, please, so that we can hear down this end of the table?
Yeah, the acoustics in here are bad anyway.
54% of our teachers in that survey favored the traditional grading system. 92% of our students in the high school favored a traditional grading system, and 83% of the parents favored the traditional grading system.
So did we answer Mrs. Ziem's question? Do you have a copy of the original survey?
I have it online, I just have the scores. It was a lot of questions, only one or two were on the grading. There was other questions, mostly about the platform and how that was working.
Sarah, did you
I
say
do.
you have it?
Yeah, I manage the survey, so I can provide you with all the questions. We also did an additional survey in April, at the April early release last year, of staff, in which 92% were ready to move forward with the new improvements after that initial survey that we did. And we can provide you with those results as well.
Mr. Fredricksen?
So that survey wasn't done in April?
Nope, that was done, I think it was like a February, March timeframe.
Oh.
After it came out, we took the feedback and we met with the Competency Implementation Committee,
Yeah.
presented our ideas, and then resurveyed staff
Yeah.
in April, and there's additional data from that. So we do have copies of all those surveys.
So I'd ask for a correction to the record then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Kaufman, could I ask a follow-up on something that you said, that you were sharing Dr. Murtaki's comments? It seemed as though he wanted a consistent system K-12.
The same grading system,
And
not
so-
different grading systems
Okay.
between
And so
levels.
to that, if I might finish,
Fine,
Mrs. Hohendy.
that's fine.
And so to that end, what purpose would a survey serve?
I think, well, my understanding is the parent-teacher-student survey was conducted. We got results. Competency grading was implemented as a pilot for a year, and we agreed that we were going to review that. To the best of my recollection, that review has not yet occurred. And I think I'll just say, he's not here to speak for himself, so I'm not going to put words in his mouth. So the intent of another survey is here we are a year later with all this experience. Has competency grading met the needs of the district?
So
I-
the review that was done at the May 8th board meeting, right, didn't it? They had a review on competency grading. Sarah, you gave that presentation.
I don't recall any votes coming from that. That was a presentation. There was no, we received a presentation, but there were no discussion, well, other than the presentation, but there was no voting attached to that. So now it's back in committee, I imagine, for the purpose of discussion. Ms. Hohensee?
If I may clarify, at least my understanding when I talked to Dr. Murtaki last night, he does want a consistent grading system, but I think he was talking about the high school, because there was a previous proposal to have multi-layered where teachers would select which way they wanted to go. He wanted it consistent. He wanted the report cards all one way or all the other. I don't believe, when I was talking to him, he said K through 12. I believe he understood that we're talking about the high school today, and I think, I could be wrong, but that was my understanding. Also, the presentation was about the platform. There was a survey at the end where, a presentation on the grading where they had the bar charts, but 80% of that presentation was on the platform, the X2, which was a problem the previous year before you arrived. And I believe a lot of the questions for the second survey, and I could be wrong, were on how the platform was working, because we kept adjusting the platform to minimize clicks, and because it was a real difficult problem when the pilot first started. So they spent about a year knocking out the problems with the platform. And the second survey, I think it was the platform was doing better. And there was an old grade book and a new grade book. So after this survey, we, instead of using the competency grade book, we reverted to the old grade book, but then we updated it for competency-based grading. So there was some confusion on what the surveys were taken and what they actually meant, because I don't know that all the parents thought when they favored the old traditional grading system, they didn't say, we'll go back to the traditional grading system and redo it for competency-based grading. So there was a little confusion, at least from my point, watching the whole process. But what I would like, the platform is now stable, and that's a good thing. But I'd like to know is, has this improved learning? Where is the evidence that we see that students are doing better, and is it a fair and equitable system? My concern is that we have far less A's than we used to. The C's are going down, everyone's getting a B. And the C students are allowed to remediate, the C and D and the lower students. The A students, if they remediate too much, they're called grade grubbers. So what I'm seeing is not an equitable.
Grade what?
Grade grubbers.
Oh, grubbers, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, okay. That was mentioned a lot, again, prior to you coming. So it was understood that it was too much work because the high-performing students were so motivated. They would like to remediate, maybe not indefinitely, but they were very motivated to remediate and wearing out the teachers, whereas the lesser-performing students weren't as motivated, so they weren't a burden to the teachers. So they were encouraged to remediate. So I'm hearing from parents and students that they're not allowed to remediate. If they do a certain grade or better, that the expectation is they're done. And to me, that's not, if you propose a system and you say all levels, because I looked back at the notes before the pilot went in, all levels would benefit from redos and retakes, and then only certain populations were allowed to do it. I'm not seeing that it was fair across the board, and I would like the 100-point system back to graduate, to show the difference between the hardworking students, so it's a graduation of grades instead of just, proficient or not proficient. I think it's not as specific as it used to be, and I think some of the students are losing credit for their hard work and becoming less motivated. If they want to get into a good school, they want that A+. If you get 100, you get a B. So now you have to do something above and beyond. Initially, teachers didn't have the time to create those above and beyond activities, so they were at a loss for having the opportunity to go above and beyond. So unless some evidence has changed, I don't see that it's equitable to all students, and I don't see how it's improved student learning. Plus, it's not a mandate from the state. We can keep the competencies, we can keep the philosophy, but we don't have to be in a straitjacket for a grading system that didn't live up to its promises.
Actually, Mrs. Eaton and then Miss Van Tuyver.
Well, I've spoken once, so
Well, thank you. I just want to say, when was 100 a B? On all the scales I've seen, it's 100's an A.
Not anymore.
What do you mean not anymore?
Um,
It's in policy.
If you get everything right on the test and you get 100% correct, maybe Mr. McIntosh could go into more detail, but my understanding was that was a 3 or a B, and to go
Well, if you
above
look
and
at the
beyond.
policy, it's,
I'm talking practice, not policy.
the policy has a scale for grading.
Yeah, okay.
And I wouldn't call someone who's getting an A or a B in remediation. I wouldn't. Is that what you're calling remediation?
Well, if you don't do as well as you had anticipated, say something happened, you were feeling sick, you got a lower grade than you wanted, you can't remediate if you did pretty well on the test. If you did pretty not so well, then you're more encouraged by the teachers to remediate. I'm not hearing that it's a level playing field from the students that have contacted me. And I would be very interested in your feedback, because you're boots on the ground.
So, there definitely are some teachers that still do, you know, you got every question right, you get a B on it, that kind of thing. I personally, I don't think that's fair. I don't think that we should be playing, you know, the guessing game and trying different things to get an A when all that's being asked from us is that we, you know, answer every question correctly. Especially for a lot of AP classes are still multiple choice based to prepare for the test, but some teachers of, I don't want to say AP classes, but just in general, when some teachers you get every question right, it's, you know, it is a B sometimes, and that's something that, you know, as students we're like, you know, why is this? Like, why do we have to go deeper into something when all that's being asked is that we answer every question correctly? But at the same time, I think that in a lot of other classes, like, everything's becoming sort of writing based, and it's not really circling the A, circling C, circling B, that kind of thing. So when it's writing based, I think teachers can, you know, give you a harder question maybe, so that when you do give like a thoughtful response to it, it is, and you do get it right completely, it is an A, because you're already demonstrating that you know more than you're expected. So I think that a lot of that confusion has kind of been worked out within the questions and how teachers have been learning to make, you know, the test projects harder, that kind of thing.
Mrs. Eaton?
I wish I didn't remember the particular evening when we voted on competency-based grading. It was, in my view, one of the most difficult meetings I've ever had to vote on. And it was a 5-4, I was the final vote that continued with competency. And I asked myself, if it were voted on tonight, how would I vote? And it is very, I would want to see the survey that you are speaking about. I would like to know exactly what the questions are, because basically, I was convinced to vote for competency because teachers for whom I have the greatest respect felt very strongly that I heard them saying that they had put a lot of themselves into it, heart and soul, and that they were just to a point where they thought it would become beneficial, and to pull the rug out from under them when they had gone through all of that effort and were now to a point where they might see benefits. It didn't seem fair. There weren't a lot of parents there who were voting, who were speaking against even though the survey clearly showed that there were a lot of parents, and still are a lot of parents. So I guess for me, it would make a big difference on how that survey was worded and seeing for myself the answers and how they answered them. Because, and I have, part of me thought, well, leave it with both so that they can do either or. They can do the traditional way or they can go to this new way. But I have heard very clearly from other people saying that would cause a lot of confusion, that indeed if you had two systems, the parents would be more confused than ever, because now they're gonna have one that does it one way and another that does it a different way, and so it would be, and I personally think after hearing that argument, that I would agree that probably the dual system might cause more confusion rather than simplifying it. But for me, if I felt that it would still be 54% of our teachers were still opposed to it, and then the parents and the kids were still as strongly, then this time I would reverse my vote. If they were not, if it, and I do think that X2 was a big part of that problem. I remember clearly every meeting X2 came up, every single meeting. And so if indeed that was a huge part of it, then remedying the best part of that probably resolved a lot of issues. I certainly hope it did. I pray it did. And so for me, that's why the documentation would be something that I would greatly appreciate seeing. I would also, the other night, the May 8th meeting when we discussed competencies, it wasn't, and I certainly am not intending to be critical of your efforts. I'm sure that you made great efforts, and I appreciate your efforts. For me, I would like to have heard more about the remedial tracks and the actual grading. What, for instance, last year we had this many A's. This year, going to Mrs. Hohensy's comments, we had this many A's. Next year we had this many B's. This year we have this. Comparing under the system to the new system, to indeed see if our students have suffered as a result as far as their ability to compete for colleges. That if it has given them a negative, for instance, people who got A's are now getting B's. Well, obviously if you apply for college and you get all A's, it's much better than B's. Even though B's are an honorable grade, certainly I would have been happy to have all B's, I can tell you. So that's where I am with it, and I still struggle with it. It's as you know, you can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please them all the time. And so you'd hope that the decision you make is the best decision for the people who are affected by your choices, and that's why it's very important to me to see the survey and to know exactly. And I guess I would ask you when our next curriculum and evaluation meeting is, and so that we have time to look at the documentation and study it, so that when we come to, if indeed we postpone this decision until the next meeting, that we would have a chance to review the stuff, or what the timing is.
So you're asking that for the next curriculum committee meeting, that we review the results of the first survey again?
Well, since we don't have the documentation here tonight, we can't do it tonight.
Okay.
And so if it came to the full board for a vote, I would want to see that information before I wanted to make my vote. And so I'm asking you what the timing is. When is the next curriculum meeting, and can we, but I mean, obviously, I'm not a voting member of your committee, so whatever this committee decides to do will be the law, right?
Well, it still goes to the board, so.
Well, but I mean, as
It's a
far as going to
recommendation,
the board,
perhaps.
yes.
Okay, so let me address your question about the next meeting. I did speak to Dr. Moritaki, and he expressed to me an interest of adding having 2 meetings a month, beginning in June. So what is the exact date of the next meeting? I can't for certain, we have to work that out. But I think it's fair to say that Dr. Moritaki's intent is to start conducting 2 meetings of the curriculum committee and beginning that 2 meeting process in June.
There is
Ms.
no,
Lindsay?
there's no meeting on this for curriculum. The current schedule just says this is our last one of the year. So you're gonna come up dry.
And it goes
Well-
all the way through July.
Yeah, even if you flip it over on the back. Traditionally, there was no curriculum meeting last summer. So
Well,
this is a big departure from,
Well, this is what he shared with me.
But that,
right.
excuse me, that was a committee decision, because policy met during the summer, so.
Correct.
You can, yeah. And I don't know why why you didn't meet during the summer, but because of the chair.
You're talking about the curriculum, why the, and I don't know, but he did express to me
South and
in a
north
phone call that he
for the
wanted
past 2
to
years.
meet during the summer and
Well,
have
makes
that
sense.
twice.
Yeah.
So since he's not here, we can make a decision on his behalf. So is it, in other words, I would be interested in putting forth a motion that the Curriculum and Evaluation Committee meet twice a month
I'll second that, yeah.
for, to conduct committee business. Mr. Boucher, I think we have a
Forever and a
backlog.
day, or just the summer?
Well, if the committee can vote to, well, we did get a second, so we're discussing.
Yes.
Okay. So I would say we could always discuss it at the committee when we want to stop. So in other words, initiate 2 meetings beginning in June, and that would continue until the committee would
Besides not
decide we're
meet.
caught up. I mean, to me, and I was gonna say, Mr. Boucher, we have what, 15 or 20 things on the list that we generated a couple of months back?
It's under 20 now.
It's under 20 now, okay, so we've made progress. I think we were around 24 at one point. So I think Dr. Mortaki's aware of the backlog and wants to address the backlog. And that's his purpose in suggesting that to me and the motion that I've made. So with that, we do have it, hold on a second, I made a motion.
May I ask a question while you're doing that?
Yes, Sandra, go ahead, please.
I was just going to ask Mr. Boucher or whoever knows, on the remedial kids, they must have done some kind of chart for you folks with the actual grades, no?
The kids with the recovery,
Yes, thank you.
that was in a chart at last Monday's meeting.
Well, but it didn't, I did look at that specific
Yeah.
chart. Us dummies, you have to make it.
It was the number of kids who pursued competency recovery and how many actually completed the process.
And I guess I'm not looking, I was looking more for grades. I was looking for, of these people who were remedial or who were recovery, excuse me, I'm using the wrong word. These kids who were recovery, what were their grades? And I guess I would like more conversation about how that recovery.
Excuse me, could we finish up this, we have a motion on the floor. This looks like it's gonna be a lengthy discussion. Could we finish the motion first, please?
So why don't we call the motion?
Mr. Farrington, comment on this motion?
I was just gonna suggest, why don't you just meet as needed? I mean, I don't see why, if you've got a big agenda, a lot of things on your list, then you schedule meetings when you can get people to come to your meetings, and when your list gets shorter, you can schedule fewer meetings. I don't think you need to tie yourself down to 2 meetings a month, or 3, or 1, or anything else.
Well, with the chair not being here and following up on my conversation with him, and we can certainly change that to accommodate particular needs. Dr. Brown?
I was going to ask you if you would consider starting that schedule in July. I mean, I might as well acknowledge the elephant in the room. We're not going to be here but for another month. And it seems like this is pretty important work, and you would want the folks who are actually going to carry it forward at the table. And so because of that, I would recommend that you put this substantive discussion on in July. And we'd be happy to work with you folks, but I think that would be time your time, not well spent, quite honestly.
Ms. Huntington.
Thank you, and that's an important consideration. I did ask Dr. Moseley if he had a position on this issue, and he's not familiar with it. He doesn't have it in his district. And he would want to hear both sides, and so he didn't even venture a guess, and that's reasonable. So if he doesn't come, my concern is he doesn't come on board till July. It will take a while for him to come up to speed. We're now talking August for a decision, which is far too late, is what we were told last year, to make such a decision. We need to make it earlier in order to be able to change directions, if that is the outcome. So if we delay, then there is no choice. It's only one outcome. That would be my understanding. My recommendation is if perhaps we would meet next week, bring the data that Mrs. Zine would like, and pick up the discussion, rather than beat this to death without the information she wants, to table the discussion till, say, next week, when we can bring the survey back and she can look it over.
Mr. Boucher.
Just so I'm clear, I'm not sure I'm hearing this, but I want to be clear. So, a potential outcome for this process is to change this grading system for the 2017-18 school year? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Because if that's the case, that ship has long since sailed. That would not be possible. I think one of the speakers, the public speakers, acknowledged that last Monday at the meeting. This is far too late to be changing a grading system for the opening of school in September.
Ms. Huntington.
If this is a pilot, and this board votes on whether or not to continue with the pilot, we should have been brought that information to make an evaluation in a timely manner. So I'm a little disturbed if that's true and there's no way around that we weren't given the information in time to make a decision. I would hope that there would be a remedy, because this board voted on it for 1 year. It was a pilot, and we have a bad record of putting pilots in and never looking back. The board as a whole, not individual members, just over the years and years. So I really hope that's not the case.
Mr. Farrington.
I'm not sure we ever called it a pilot, did we? I mean, we throw this in and we
We
say
did
it's
say
a
it was going to
pilot.
be reviewed
We
within
said
a year.
we were
We
at the
haven't had a
point where,
review.
that's right, so I don't know that it was a formal pilot that was going to, but we did say we were going to revisit during the year, and I think we've had two, have you guys come in twice to give us an update, once in the fall?
Once in November and once in May.
Yeah. So I think that we've been consistent in what I understood the intent to be, was that we would go forward with the system for this year and that we would get an update. And we got an update essentially at the end of the first
Yeah, the first quarter.
First quarter.
Don't we have, 1 second, Mr. Fredricksen. We have information, we have data on the grade distribution, which speaks to part of what Cam was talking about. And I've got your list.
Okay, good.
The discussions we had were on, we haven't looked at the impact of the grading system on the performance of the students. I'd be curious to learn what's happened to the people who've applied to colleges. You know, I think we have to look at that. But what I would like to do now is call a question. Can I call a question, or can I request a vote on the motion that's actually on the floor?
2 meetings a month?
For the 2 meetings a month, as Ms. Van Twyver had so
Asked
pointed
about
out
long time
several
ago?
minutes ago,
Yeah.
in another planet, on another island. So the motion is for the committee to meet 2 times a month. I made the motion, Ms. Holency seconded it. A vote, please. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Opposed? None.
Okay, now we can talk about,
Okay. Okay, 2 times a month passed. Okay, Mr. Fredricksen.
The only thing I was going to say was, I think where the confusion came in was when we were looking at the middle school grading. That was the one that was tagged as that one was tagged as the pilot. I don't recall I mean, granted, I came on late as, this position after the discussions went on for the competency-based grading, but I never heard the terms used as pilot, or I don't recall them being used as pilot. I thought what we were waiting to do with the middle school was, before we went forward, was work out the bugs at the elementary and the high school. If I remember correctly, maybe I'm wrong, I don't, but that was my opinion. So we talked about a pilot, and then we turned the pilot, we shut the pilot off at the middle school to wait until everything was ironed out. And that was my impression, but maybe I'm wrong, I don't know.
Ms. Hohenstein?
My understanding of the middle school discussion was that the board had asked for evidence that this program was a success, and then to revisit the middle school, and that was 8 months ago. And we never got the information that we requested, so we could finish up on our deliberations on the middle school. We wanted evidence that the high school program was improving learning for our students, and that never came. My understanding was, for the last year, they voted to continue the pilot for 1 more year. The previous year, it was labeled as a pilot. We never voted to say that this was permanent. We never said this is, okay, we're all in. So my expectation was that we were going to get information in a timely manner. We would evaluate it to see whether it was improving learning, and that we were going to make a decision as a board. And I would like to suggest that we meet next week with the information that Mrs. Zine brought, so we don't beat it to death without information, unless we could bring the survey,
Which survey?
the survey that she
Most
wants.
recent one, the one that,
That's the
Sarah.
April 2017.
Mr. Farrington and Mrs. Zine?
Couple of things. The middle school was a hang-up over, all the middle school wanted to implement with characteristics of a successful learner, right? They didn't want to implement the whole grade thing, and everything was held captive because of this. All the middle school, I think, wanted to do was that one particular small item. The other thing about the grade distribution and fewer A's, just in general, my understanding of competency-based grading, it's the change is that the whole purpose is to measure how much the student learns about the subject, and in part was to do away with the fact that a student could be getting a B+ and go to the teacher and say, what can I do for extra credit? Can I make a poster? Can I bring in fruit tarts for the class or something like that? And to get away from all of that stuff so that we were only measuring the student's proficiency. And so if that is in fact part of the objective in competency-based grading, then I would think that you would expect to have slightly fewer A's. But we can look at the distribution, that's fine with me, but I'm not particularly surprised if we aren't getting as many A's if we're not doing posters and fruit tarts.
Okay. Mrs. Zine?
as usual, I agree with Dr. Brown. I do struggle with changing anything without giving Dr. Moseley an opportunity. He will be the one who has to implement it. And for us to change it, when, as Mrs. Holmesy clearly said, he really hasn't, this will be something that he needs to catch up on. He needs to, it's gonna be a lot he needs to catch up on. And so but I do concern myself with changing it and then him having to implement what we changed, because let's take worst case. Let's say that the vote, that we do change it, and then he has to implement it, but when he gets here, he agrees that we shouldn't have changed it. Then now he said, I think it's a sensitive, touchy thing to be changing something this, there's a no-win again. This is one of those, this has been, competency has been for me right from the beginning, lose. So, and I feel in this case, it's right back at it, because I don't think that, I think Dr. Moseley should certainly have an opportunity to weigh in. So, I do agree with you, that's a big concern.
Well, if I think about it, and I absolutely agree, Dr. Moseley could benefit, as we all could, from a lively discussion about competency-based grading. I've got a couple of things in my head that I'm thinking about. One is Ms. Hohensy's suggestion that we look to having a meeting in a short time frame, consistent with our goal of 2 per month. I want to get information out there so this discussion is well discussed. And I think each time it gets discussed, we get a better, more informed committee. administration and obviously the public and our students. To that end, I could see the benefit of having a discussion without Dr. Moseley being present. I think that benefits the district. I think he has the opportunity to join us, watch our reality TV show if he can, and use that as a background opportunity. So he's coming up to speed and becoming better informed, just like we as a board are. So to that extent, I think we can move forward in the short term to perhaps review the survey to Mrs. Zeem's interest. And I'd be curious to look at that second survey again. My recollection of the second survey was it fixed mostly things on X2, which were the real issues that were bothering the teachers, and that it was the first survey went to 3 large audiences. We had, what, over 300 teachers, I think, who may have responded to that initial. Sarah, you were shaking your head, so.
Oh, I think it was probably more around 250, and it was almost the same amount for the second survey, because we did it after an early release.
Oh, because I remember, I thought that second survey was to a subset of the teachers, not the entire not to the teaching staff at the high schools.
It was to everyone, and I can get all those numbers for you. We have all that data.
Okay, so there's obviously some
So,
memory failure here. Dr. Brown?
thank you, Mr. Kaufman. Could I help somebody, sorry, this is too much on the phone, help me understand better the accelerated timeline for this? So why the need to meet next week? Because as Mr. Boucher has said, and I will echo, this can't be changed for September of 2017. So that ship sailed. So I understand a look at the data, I understand a rather measured approach to it. I don't think you want to handicap your new superintendent with a major sea change in July. So I guess I don't understand the urgency to meet next week, or even again this month.
Ms. Swanson? And Mr. Fredricksen, did you still have your hand up?
No, you already
Okay.
answered
I was gonna ask Mrs. Morandis if she could email out those, rather, because I know some of them were lengthy, both surveys, and I think there were comments on them. So those who want to dig deep, they can, and those who don't, they can just look at the survey numbers without looking at the comments. But last year in May, it was still a live discussion. We hadn't decided. We didn't vote on what we were gonna do until August, so I don't understand why, if we decided in August last year, which was late, why we can't have this discussion in May, and that's why I thought if we have one next week, we're still in May, to try to figure out which way we're going, because I don't like the decision to be made for us. I thought the board was gonna have a voice in that decision.
Anybody else have a comment? Mrs. Zeem?
Mrs. Brown, would you, when you send that out, would you tell me how many of those teachers are high school, how many are middle school, and how many are elementary?
They're all high school, so
It
it
was all high
was
school.
high school students, high school parents, and high school staff. Middle school was not
Thank you.
included in that.
Thank you, that's good clarification for me. And if indeed you decide to discuss it next week, I would respectfully request that, if nothing else, Dr. Moseley be invited to attend your meeting at with an email.
So if I may see if I can establish some middle ground here and try and synthesize what's been said. We agreed that we would like to meet twice, beginning next month. And while you guys were talking, I was looking at the calendar to try and see what dates might be available. So I'm using the latest calendar, the blue one. So, because we change these things all the time. So if I'm correct in reading this, June 6th is a Tuesday night, is a Tuesday. We have no board meetings that week at all. So I'd like to suggest that this committee meet,
I think that's the night of the public hearing,
what public
For
hearing?
the budget?
Yes.
budget public
Yes.
hearing.
I think you're right.
It's the citywide public hearing at North at 7.
Okay, thanks. Maybe we should put those big events on our own calendar.
Mr. Kaufman.
Hold on a second,
Okay.
please.
And what may not be on that calendar, if I might, is the mediation the NTU.
Oh,
was
which is
set
on
for
the 7th.
My birthday.
Happy birthday. Find a way to
We'll
celebrate.
bring your cake.
Please, please, don't forget.
June 7th is the interview?
Yes.
It's early.
I like strawberry shortcake, by the way.
So that would free up, then that frees up the 8th. Looking at that same week, June 8th, Thursday. So I would suggest, and does anybody recall Dr. Mortaki's travel plans? Will he be back?
This one trip is, he said, is 1 week, but I assume he'd be back.
So, and being at the end of that week, I think we can account for him traveling perhaps earlier in the week. Ms. Hohensee?
I don't mean to, I just, June is fine, but I just thought in perspective, if we're going to even have an option, if we're even gonna entertain the idea of an option of changing, it's better to go 1 week than 2 or 3 weeks. That's all. The farther we push it out, the more certain the outcome will be.
I'm confused. I heard that the ship already sailed.
Can we ask administration to expand on that, Mr. Boucher, or just to give us your thinking?
You want to comment, Sarah?
Yeah.
This is the person who would have to do it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
to make changes, well, one thing to clarify, which I've said multiple times, is there can't be 2 grading scales. So you can't have a choice between a 100-point grade scale and the competency scale. So you would be, if you, however the board voted, if they chose the 100-point scale, you'd be forcing all the teachers to not grade by competency. So they wouldn't get that option. And also it would require a significant amount of work and money, which would not be completed by September of next year. So this new superintendent in the school district would be starting without any of that functionality in X2. It's just not enough time.
Functionality, you're saying as far as implementing the report cards?
Yeah, the report card,
So when it came time for their report cards, they would not be ready?
correct.
Mr. She's first.
Do you, thank you, do you keep backups? I mean, don't we have the old, a backup, the software, what we used to use, we would just be reverting the system to that. We could, in some sense, use those.
I mean, that's certainly something we could explore, but all of the changes that we've purchased and worked with X2 on, we would have to revert back. So we've completely redesigned the interface to meet the needs of what the staff and the parents asked for in the portal. So all of the feedback that we got from those surveys, we've addressed it and we fixed it.
Thank you.
So now to revert back would cost also a significant amount of money.
And waste of previous money.
Thank you, Ms. Miranda's, that was very helpful.
Any other questions?
That's
Dr.
actually my
Brown?
question, thank you. I was going to ask you or you, how much money did the district spend on implementing competency-based grades, including teacher training and software?
Good question. I don't recall ever seeing a price tag or attached to that.
It was not the policy of Mr. Conrad to share those things with the board that I remember. I don't, do you, Mrs. Mirandos, remember that ever being shared?
It wasn't shared, but it was,
Well, I know that we've devoted, at least since I've been here, 2 in-service days to that, maybe more than 2 in-service days to that. So,
I would think it was more than 2 in-service days, to be honest with you, because that was what swayed me on the meeting. These were teachers who had clearly spent hours and hours and hours, because the in-service days are only a glimpse of the time they spent. The real work was done at home, when you had to change, you know, if you had the 4 classes and you had you got, 150 kids that you have to, it's a sizable, it is a daunting task, especially when they have to fit it around everything else.
true.
It's not like it was in the summer and they had nothing but that to do. It was, the way it happened, they were pretty much forced to do it while they were doing all of their other sundry heavy tasks.
So they put a lot of time into it.
I would dare say. And that was what swayed me that night. I tell you honestly, there were teachers that I have great esteem and respect for, that I know are caring, committed professionals who give up their time unselfishly. And to penalize them would be a very hard vote for me to make. It just would. I'm not sure I could do it. But if indeed they're gonna do it even a year from now, maybe it is a conversation we need to have regardless, knowing that I appreciate the expansion of why, because sometimes when you're not an educator, you don't understand the implications. You don't understand the full impact that you're having on their lives. I mean, these are people who have to go home and be a mother and they have to keep their house clean and they have to do all the other things in their life. And so they were overwhelmed, I think. And I think you've heard that many, many times since you've been in the district, that our teachers were some overwhelmed by everything that happened too much too soon.
Well, what I hear, and I'm sorry, I'm interrupting Mrs. Hohensee, and that's been repeated in any forum I've been in, is please stay the course. Don't make another change. Not this year. We just want a stabilized environment. Thank you for maybe taking the time.
So if I may ask a question of Ms. Mirandos, how much time does it take? What does it take to change a grading system? Is it
I mean,
months?
Well, I'll just speak
Oh,
back to when we
that's
did the standards-based report card at the elementary. That was a 3-year process to create that new report card. So the competency report card that we created 2 years ago, I think we worked on it probably for about 2 years. So it depends on what changes you guys would be looking on making, and that's certainly something, we could look at, but not in the time span of a summer.
Were you asking about the IT part of it, or were you asking about the whole process?
Mine was the big envelope, since it's all on their hands, right? Ms. Hohensee?
Thank you. I think the PD was harder on coming to something new than it would be professional development restoring something that they're familiar with. So I don't think there will be a great cost in reversing the decision as there was in making the pilot program. For the functionality, that is a concern, but it could be that some of the functionality you just don't use. We might be able to streamline what we have. There might be a way to use what we have as we incrementally go back. I don't remember how much it was. I remember things like $30,000-$50,000 for computer software or something like that. But again, it depends how creative you get. I mean, I used to program things, certainly not this, and I don't mean to speak as an expert, but there might be a way to keep what we've got and realign it with minor changes until maybe we can revise the whole system down the road, if we were to go that way. But whether we make the decision for this September or for the following year, I think we need as a board to have that discussion. Because I think that's what we told parents when we started out, that this was a pilot for 1 year, then it became a pilot for 2, and there are a number of parents that are expecting us or that we would evaluate and make a decision.
George? Mr. Farron?
How many?
Sorry.
How many parents would you expect there? You say a number of parents.
Are you asking me to do a survey? I don't know.
No, I'm just saying, you say that like we oftentimes as board members, we say I've had a lot of people email me about this, or I've had a lot of this, or I've had a lot of that. But then oftentimes when I ask, the number is 20 or 30 emails or something like that. And 20 or 30 emails, although their opinions are important, we're talking about in the 2 high schools, 3,600 kids? And so I think it's a case of, I think we have to have a better sense of the numbers that are troubled by this versus the numbers that have adjusted to it or have learned to like it or whatever, and find out what that is, because I don't think we want to turn the system upside down for a relatively small percentage. I think that Mr. McIntyre made a good point, and I think it's something that we should look at about the multiple choice tests, and that you can't do better than a B even if you get them all right. That doesn't seem to me to meet the intent of what we were doing. But again, I think that's another fix that we need to address rather than, again, throwing the whole system out.
Well, for me to respond in terms of how many, we already had a survey. It was very clear what the parents said. It was very clear what the students said. and it was very clear of what a majority of the students said. So to nullify the voice of a survey of the entire high school community, I believe is wrong. Have some of those opinions and voices changed? Maybe, but it's also possible that those that were in favor of it have changed and decided they would like to get rid of it. I think we owe it to the community to find out, and now that it's a year later, that survey was conducted, they've had another year of working with it, the X2 stuff, the interface issues have been resolved. I think now we need to go back to the content, because I think the X2 issues clouded the content. I think, and good, bad, or ugly, that's just, Sarah's kind of agreeing with me that the interface issues clouded the value proposition for competency grading. And I think we should, we can put it to bed, but I think it's going to take some effort, some kind of a survey, some kind of mechanism for feedback. The timeline of that is really the big issue in my mind. Mr. Farrington?
Yeah, I would just, my recollection is that before we ever did that survey, I suggested the first thing we should do is to address the technological problems, because then you clear that clutter away and then you find out what the real issues are underneath. We didn't. We did the survey, then they did some of the work, and then they had this professional day, early release day, I think it was, where they brought all the teachers in and addressed a number of the concerns that they had had previously to that, and the sentiment of the teachers shifted almost 180 degrees, if I recall the numbers on that. And
Right.
so
My recollection was that was user interface issues. It
that's
wasn't
right.
the
And
content.
you really had to get that out. They were talking about having to jump around several pages and all that, and I think you addressed it again the other night, that's not the case anymore. So I think that the technological things we have cleared up, we can verify that in a number of ways, but I don't think we should get too hung up on an assessment or a survey that was done before we even tried to address the technological problems that were underlying a lot of the other. It was hard for parents to get updates because the thing wasn't current. It was hard for teachers to work with, and I think those things should not be confused with competency-based grading.
Did I see Ms. Horn say, did you have a hand?
Thank you. I know it percentage-wise, I don't get people calling me and telling me that they like it. It's pretty uniform that when they contact me, they don't like it. They're happy, obviously they don't need to pick up the phone or send an email. So that's not exactly the most accurate survey, but whatever. The other problem is the students and the parents were not having the same difficulty with the platform that the teachers were. They weren't trying to put in hundreds of grades, so they didn't experience that frustration. So their answer was there's a policy decision, and then was the implementation and the platform. So I think the teachers, my impression of the second survey was mostly to the teachers. I don't think we even surveyed the parents the second time.
No, they weren't. I don't
So it
recall.
was like, many of the questions were, how is the platform working? Because they had innumerable problems and they were very readily addressed. And we have a good IT department and they addressed all those problems. And we stabilized the platform, and that was exactly what we needed to do. But I don't think the second survey was indicative of the policy. That you have to separate the two. I think we're looking at the policy, regardless of what the implementation is. So the primary would be the first survey where we got all three cohorts, parents, the students, and the teachers in, and what they thought about it. And if we could review that, if we could look at the policy itself, and I think the sooner we look at that and put it to rest, the more we can just move on.
George, Mr. Farrington,
Just not to
sorry.
belabor the point, but just as a ballpark, roughly how many parents have you had call you that don't like competency-based grading?
Every single one of them.
Well,
I said 100%. I don't,
but, I mean, is it 20 or is it 200 or
haven't
2,000?
counted.
I'm sorry?
I have not counted.
Okay.
I'm not here to, because it wouldn't indicate anything. It just indicates those who spoke up. And we
Okay.
have a problem because there is intimidation when parents
No,
come.
let's not play the intimidation
I'm not
card.
going there, so I don't want to get
Tired of
into
that.
numbers.
Okay,
Mrs.
I'm
Dean?
done.
There were a lot of parents, George, as the figures prove, but that doesn't mean they still feel that way. They may not. Hopefully they do not. I am prayerful that they have, that with the corrections. Mrs. Hohensee just said we corrected the X2 pretty much. And I did not have not acknowledged. Thank you, Mrs. Miranda. That was no small nightmare. I remember that it was, and so please know that I personally recognize that that was a lot of work for you, and you did a good job, and you deserve to be recognized. So on behalf of the board, I think I'm speaking when I say thank you for the workload that he gave you, because it was just a little bit I saw, and I'm sure I didn't see all that you saw. So we did appreciate your efforts. Thank you very much.
Mr. McIntyre, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Do you have anything you'd like to add to the discussion?
I just want to say that the grade book for students is definitely much more clear. Like, I definitely think those problems are out of the way almost, because when I log on, all I see is a letter grade. I don't see a number. I don't see a language that says like proficient with distinction. I just see the letter, and that's very simple and clear for us to understand. And then the other thing was, I don't know if there's any major problems with it anymore. I think it's all very like tweakable things, so I almost wouldn't recommend going back right now, because I think as students now, we've kind of accepted it. We've accepted that's going to be something that we're going to have to deal with, and that, it's something that we're used to, almost. And I remember when we first went to this was really supposed to be a compromise between the 100-point scale and the 4-point scale. So, it's stated in the policy, I think. I was reading it a few days ago. It was like, it said that teachers can still use the 100-point scale. They can just convert it to a letter grade. So I don't know if that message is being clearly spoken throughout, because I think that some teachers feel that they're locked, that kind of thing. So I think that they should know that they can do that. But other than that, I think we're used to it by now.
Mrs. Hohensee?
Thank you. I have another question. Last year, you talked about an arithmetic concern, that you thought that you weren't given enough credit when it went down to the 4-point system versus the 100-point system. Do you still hold that opinion?
Yeah, in a way I do hold that opinion, because I notice once you get so far in a class and you have so many grades in a class, you can get 5 A's in a row and your grade doesn't change. Like, if you're at the B range and you get, let's say you just have like 10, 15 B's in there from your previous test, then all of a sudden you go on an A trend, your grade doesn't really change. Like, it might bring it up like, 0.02, 0.03, but it doesn't really do that much compared to the 100-point scale. Like, I know at the end of the year, some teachers try to, give you like grade boosts and that kind of thing, just to, to help you out. Like, I've noticed that doesn't happen in competencies that much when teachers like, give you an A or something on that. I noticed that it doesn't really do anything. Like, you can't really change your grade once you're where you're at, which I don't know if that's, is like almost like a demotivating kind of thing. But there definitely is a difference between that.
Anybody at the table have a comment? Ms. Miranda?
Oh, I just wanted to clarify something that could be a professional development issue, but there are several teachers that, particularly in year-long courses, double weight assignments at the end of the semester to avoid that. Again, that's teacher discretion, but that's part of the feedback we got last year, and that we addressed it. So again, up to the teacher, but several teachers do double weight assignments at the end of the year. So that might not be CAM's particular teachers, but that's something that we try to push through PD as an option.
Ms. Van Twyver, just want to
What?
just solicit input from you, if you have any?
No.
Okay. Dr. Brown came over to me a moment ago and asked me if I was going to entertain any public comment. We hadn't planned on it. We do have 2 members of the public here tonight. So I will just, one of them has said no. I think that was a no, right? Okay. Sitar, right?
Yes.
Did you have comment on
Absolutely.
competency?
Absolutely.
Would you please keep it brief, though? Thank you.
Okay, I'll try and keep it brief. Since I'm being directed to the chair here. Need me to go through name and address and all that for the record, or? Sure. Bob Sitar, 31 Bedford Street in Nashua. I guess I'll start with the changes to X2. X2 was horrible, it was horrible when it first rolled out. Not just from a teacher's point of view, from a parent's point of view. Having used X2 in the middle schools and then going up into the high school, I stopped getting email notices when my son's grades dropped below a certain percentage. I stopped getting those on a daily basis. It was difficult to find which assignments were driving his performance. And it was also difficult to figure out sort of what his overall grade was relative to the things that he was doing. The changes that were made absolutely improved that. I now get daily emails. I now see his grades change on the fly as things get turned in or not. More on that later. So I think that where we're at technologically is a much, much better place from a parent's point of view. Are there still things that I have issues with? There are. But it doesn't boil down to whether it's competency-based grading or what the grading system is. One of the things that I kept hearing Mr. McIntyre say was some teachers make 100 points a B. Some teachers make it an A. What I've seen in my own son's teachers is that every teacher does things a little bit differently. I've seen comments where parents can't understand why their child is getting A pluses on their homework but getting C's on their tests. It's because the homework assignments aren't being graded. They're being checked off, were they done? Checked off, A plus. Not done, 0. Or NE or IP or whatever the grade assignment is there. And so that feedback back to a parent who's keeping an eye on the grades, you know, it looks like they're doing fine until they hit the buzzsaw of the exam. You know, my son has missed some school. I don't know whether the teachers are putting in missing for the assignments that he misses when he's not there for the test, the homework. What I see is an NE. My understanding is that some teachers can put in a 0 for a missing assignment or have it not contribute to the grade. Based on my experience, that seems to be the rule rather than the exception, is having it count against their grade. And so all of a sudden he misses a week of school because of illness and his grades go straight into the tank. And then he's of course left trying to catch up to make up his grade and actually get above water. There was another third point that I had. From the point of view of the competencies themselves, I mean, I think I've always been a strong proponent of that. I think it makes sense in terms of the way you can manipulate a grade or come out of a class having passed it without actually having mastered the skills that are required. I'll use the example of math. Maybe you're a math whiz, you don't have to write anything down, and that's fine until you get to the point that you have to write things down and now you don't know how to set up a problem. Or if you're writing a paper, you can read, you can form ideas, but you can't write. Well, you might get passed along without ever really learning how to become proficient in writing. These are skills that once you get outside of school, you still need to have. We talk about what the metrics are for determining whether competency-based grading is successful in our district or not. And we talk about, well, how many A's, how many B's. The A's have slipped, we've got more B's, we've got a few more C's. Really the metric I think that we're looking for is, are kids still getting into college? What does their scholarship money look like? I think we also need to look at what happens once they get to college. Do we have, one of the things that has stuck with me since I became involved with the implementation committee was Dr. Murataki's comment that the trades had talked to him about students not being prepared to take that examination, that apprenticeship examination. Are we getting any closer to that? I don't think the grades are the metric we should be using. We should be looking at what happens after the grades. Are they doing well in school? How many of our college-bound students end up taking remediation courses in math and English because they fell short here, but still somehow managed to garner the grades to get into college with that deficiency? I think that, whether we want to talk about grades, I don't see school, at least now in my advanced years, as a, I don't see school as a grade factory. I mean, if we wanted to get kids more A's, the teachers could do that. We could have the entire district getting straight A's. But that doesn't serve the students, and it doesn't serve the community. So, I think at this point, we talked about surveys and looking at the old survey. The old survey has all the technology stuff in it. And at this point, I wouldn't really consider it valid. Certainly not valid to make any decisions off of. I think the idea to put together another survey that now, addresses, are we happy with the technology that we've got? One piece. The other piece is, how are your kids doing? How are your students doing? How have the students reacted to it? I think change is very hard for a lot of people, and changing to a competency-based grading system was hard for a lot of people. I think that there was not, from my point of view, not a lot of understanding by parents as far as what the goal here was. I had to come up to speed very quickly on what competency-based grading was in order so that I could be helpful to the committee. And it was many long nights and lots of reading, and I don't know that a lot of parents have put that in. And I don't know that, that was stuff on my own, doing my own research, not anything that came from the district. I think that if we ran another survey, properly written, I think we'll see very different results. Because I do know that after we sent that survey out and after we got the results back, there were lots of questions about, well, how was this question interpreted? How was that, how could it have been interpreted to give either a positive or a negative response? And I think that if, the next survey that we do, provided that we do a survey, that, we make sure that the questions are very plain so that we can get some useful information out of them.
May I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
More to your parent experience and your son, and missing school and finding himself in a hole.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm concerned about that, because obviously you're on top of him, I'm sure about that. But are you getting the help, the resources? Is recovery a piece of your recovery process of the grade, or is he capable of kind of just blasting through it on his own?
The biggest challenge that he has right now is that if he's out of school for a week, he's missed effectively 2 weeks of class on the block system, right? He has, I forget what block is, 20, 30 minutes, if that. Not a lot of time to make up an hour's worth of material or 5 hours worth of material. He's got 5 classes. The big, and then even staying after school, there's a question of, is the teacher available? What can he get done after school? And how can he make up that work while still trying to stay on top of the stuff that's coming down? In some cases, that's staying on top of the new stuff isn't that hard, but in a course like a math or a science course, once you get backed up, and the new stuff, you have no idea what's going on because you haven't grasped the basic stuff. I don't know off the top of my head what that solution is, but I know that he and I have had discussions about, making sure that he's advocating for himself, talking to the teachers if he needs to talk to the guidance counselors or even the assistant principal of his academy, thank you. That he needs to figure out what that solution is. And unfortunately, it's not always as easy as, here's a homework packet, okay, go figure it out. Because, he said, well, I did the homework, I turned it in, haven't gotten anything back. Or I haven't gotten the homework, or they, teacher said, we'll figure it out in E block, and then that just never really transpires. And so he gets tired of me leaning on him. So, from the point of view of the, recovering things, I think it's really, you do poorly on a test and you want to recover it. I think that's easy for a student to do. I think for a student that misses any length of time, any length of class time, a week, I would say a week or longer, it becomes very challenging to get up to that. And quite honestly, we've been struggling to find the supports to figure out how to get him sort of back on track.
Thanks, because we did talk about the situation where, in your case, it's an absence of a period of time, but if a student is in the new semester trying to recover the previous semester, that same challenge is still occurring, right? They have all
Right.
the new information and they're still trying to catch up, and especially for non-AP or honors students, that could really be discouraging, and it's understood. So I want to thank you for sharing, A, participating as you do, and B, for giving us some on-the-ground reporting, which I always appreciate. We don't get enough of that sometimes. So
Thank you.
I'd like to close the topic on competency grading, so I'll just ask if there's any final comment from anybody. If seeing none, we'll just move on to our next topic of kindergarten. So, yes, yeah, I gotta recalibrate my stuff here. But I do wanna, as it relates to, I would like to propose that this committee meet again on Thursday, June 8th, and again on Monday, June 19th. So I move accordingly.
Do you second that, Ms. Owen?
Or can I have a
Are we
second?
voting on that?
I think we should,
Okay, I'll second that.
and if we need to, we'll readjust them, but I want to get the two dates in the book so we're clear on our intent as expressed. And the agenda items for those things are to be determined. Okay, I'm not going to try and go that far. Dr. Moritaki's the chair, and should be riding the horse, as it were. Thank you for coming in tonight. Those of you that need to leave, this is a graceful exit time. Okay, so
Sorry.
move to set next meeting dates of Thursday, June 8th.
Can I ask a question, why not the 5th, and then it'd be 2 Mondays in a row? We don't usually meet on Thursday.
I don't have a problem with that.
I have to check my calendar, so whatever you do.
It can be adjusted.
All right, the 5th. And Monday, the 19th, June 19th. At 5:30, which is our common time. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? One abstention, Ms. Van Tarver?
It doesn't matter.
Okay. Okay. So we're gonna move to the kindergarten topic then, and, Mr. Boucher, are we available, that presentation from Dr. Moritaki, are we able to project it as he asked? This was the title page?
You won't get it set up in under 10 minutes.
Okay.
Do I have it for sure?
Perhaps you just read it if you've got it printed out.
I just printed the cover sheet,
Oh,
so.
okay. I could find it.
Do you have enough copies over there? But we have enough to talk about. Is that possible to set it up so we can?
Let me see if I have it first.
Okay. Oh, that was my top sheet. I just printed the top sheet, thanks. Okay, so on the topic of kindergarten, let me see if I can channel my inner Dr. Moritaki and share with you the comments that I got. Okay. So, as far as what he would like this committee to do is to look at the materials, and we didn't get, there were actually two things sent into the district office. One was a list of the 90 various competency standards, and that list is what Dr. Moritaki had asked to be printed, and also, this is that document, right?
My laptop is at Touch Street.
Ouch, okay. So the answer is, the piece of paper that I just handed out is an inclusive document of those 90 different, these are the standards for kindergarten, full-day kindergarten. And what Dr. Moritaki would like us to do is to review these and essentially create a framework for a survey that would be delivered through some mechanism like a Survey Monkey or something to the kindergarten teachers in the district, which I think are somewhere around 40 people,
Presently about 32.
32 teachers that teach the full-day kindergarten.
Would you like the slides? I've got them on my laptop if you want to read from them, or will that not be of any help?
Well, let me work from his notes in front of it,
Okay.
because these are his notes. The first
Okay.
two slides are all that really matter.
Oh, fine.
The other one, and maybe I can draw it on the board to show people what he had put forward. And in fact, let me just review the content. This is the slide presentation that Dr. Moritaki forwarded to us, and I'm just going to read from it. Sorry. It says full-day kindergarten has been proposed for all Nashua schools in the current year, next year, and not just Title I. There's concern by some teachers and parents that adjustment of the kindergarten curriculum should be discussed and undertaken. The state legislature has passed legislation which allows local school boards to establish their own K-12 standards, and new legislation also prevents the state of New Hampshire from enforcing the Common Core mandate. Local districts can voluntarily choose to retain some or all of the Common Core standards following a local review process and that subsequently is approved by the local board. So with that in mind, Dr. Moritaki is asking this committee to work on, create, we're not going to walk out of here with a final document tonight. This is more of a working session to come up with, but at least understand Dr. Moritaki's mindset about his proposal on how to address this, and see if we can reach common ground on that to bring it forward for the creation of a survey that would subsequently go to those 32 teachers. Mr. Boucher just confirmed that we have, that teach kindergarten.
Correction, please.
I'm sorry.
32 is not, they're not all full day.
Okay,
There's only
next
about-
year?
Next year, there will be about 40 full day.
So I would imagine that,
Presently, it's about 20.
okay,
18 to 20.
okay. I would think this questionnaire would be directed to the teachers that would be teaching kindergarten
Did
next
you
year.
say full-time, 18 to 20,
I
full-time
can go
kindergarten?
get the exact number, that's the ballpark, 18 to 20.
But it's full-time, not
Currently.
part-time.
Currently.
So How do we get from 20 to 40? I thought we were only moving 10 and a half teachers.
We're going to 40 sections of all-day K,
Okay, no, okay, 40 sections.
all day.
Right,
18 to 20 is current full day at the title
of
schools.
number of sections.
At the title schools, where it's full-time presently.
Okay, how many teachers will we have next year?
We're looking for 40.
Okay, my understanding was we're only moving 10. Are we hiring new ones, or is that's comprehensive, the 10 and a half that we're sliding?
We have, presently you have the 40 slots. 37 of the 40 would be filled either by existing teachers, by half-time teachers who would become full-time,
Correct, yeah.
5 of those, and by reassigning people within a building, leaving 3 postings. So only 3 of the 40 are being posted. And the expectation is those 3 would be filled by teachers who may have been displaced or by others in the district who might want to
Okay,
do that.
thank you.
So, again, I'm trying to channel my inner Dr. Murataki, and I have some notes from a conversation that I had with him. So his intent is for this survey to get a discussion going, to really produce a basic concept that would be essentially handed over to the administration, where they would essentially prepare the survey that would subsequently be provided to the teachers. He had a strong wish to express that he felt it was absolutely necessary that this kindergarten survey be done before the end of the school year. We do have a time limit to ensure that this gets done before that. And that, interestingly, this essentially establishes a baseline or a working example of future reviews for the remaining elementary grades, and in later years to the middle school and also the high school, where this is on that list that we created a few weeks ago. This is the bottom-up review of the curriculum for each grade that he would like this committee to do. To that end, okay, thank you.
Can I ask this question?
Sure.
So the idea is to have kindergarten, just kindergarten teachers review this?
Yes, they're teaching it. Do you think it should be expanded
No,
beyond?
I don't know, it's just not the usual way I've seen curriculum done, because you have a tendency to do longitudinal studies and everything else, I mean, with all the money we've spent on looking at data, looking at, standards, what standards affect what standards at grades, I don't know, it just seems a little short, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know.
Narrow.
Narrow.
Would you have a different approach?
I wouldn't do this, that's why we hire curriculum specialists. I have them take a look at it, and what they do is they look at, usually if you're teaching something in, I don't know, first grade, you're not just looking at what the impact on first grade is, you're looking at what the impact is down the road. And we've already shown, we've shown and we've attacked it. If you look at the previous math scores and stuff, in the past when we looked at that, we thought there was issues at, I don't know, let's say grade 6, and we go back and look, we find out, hey, we missed teaching these, these particular standards at grades 2 and 3. So, those obviously weren't important at the time to that particular grade, because maybe the teacher didn't have that longitudinal view on it. So, I'm just a little surprised we're talking about doing and I probably haven't been paying attention to my emails, but this to me seems like a step back. Just walking in and saying to, a certain grade, hey, what do you think's important to teach? And you don't have that broad view to know what's up down the road. I mean, I would hate to not teach something in, an earlier grade, and then all of a sudden you find out you need it in 5th and 6th. I mean, we've done a pretty good job of messing that up, and I'm talking years past. We just spent the last 2 or 3 years, with some of the work with Kathy and Ron, identifying those things that we've missed in pre-teaching and stuff like that. So I'm just a little surprised we're going this route. That's all. I would have thought that would have been, if we were gonna, well, first of all, we have kindergarten standards, and I thought that was based on what was taught later on down the road, so. But anyway, that's just my thought process. I think it's a pretty narrow approach. It's just my opinion.
Just clarification, currently now, today in Nashua, there are 20 people It's not 18, it's 20 people exactly teaching all day K. That's the total from the 5 title schools.
And that's moving to 40 next year.
Yes.
Mr. Fredricksen, if I can follow up, I think part of what Dr. Mortaki was attempting to do was to kind of put something out there to start a discussion. Part of his email thread talked about a committee being formed that would have, you know, obviously administrators, the curriculum specialists involved, and that they would develop the survey that would subsequently be distributed by the end of the current school year.
I'm a little concerned about how they would respond to a survey that this board is asking them to do. I mean, are you gonna get an honest one from
One
them?
of the, no, yeah, I
Honest one
understand.
from them, because if they can't honestly answer the superintendent, you know, and her administration, I'm not so sure that they're gonna be very eager to help us out.
You're
You know what I mean?
expressing, yes, absolutely, you're expressing something.
And the other point that kind of bothers me is, I don't think the board has approved that we should do this. And we're gonna spend this time working on a survey that would probably affect iReady. Results of the survey may affect iReady and the work that's already been done, because of changes that would have to be made. And I personally don't feel that I am qualified to question the standards right now. I mean, I just don't feel that I'm qualified to do that. I think we have teachers and curriculum people that are qualified to do that, so.
Before I call on Ms. Hohensee, Dr. Moritaki expressed a very similar concern about ensuring that the way the survey was conducted was a way that would be trusted by the teachers so that they would in fact provide useful information for planning purposes. So it's a sensitive topic. I'm glad you highlight it because I think it deserves to be
Well, I think it's-
considered.
I think we're in a critical situation right now in this district, and I don't think they're too happy with us as a board, you know, so,
Again, Dr. Mortaki was looking for the administrators. I think what he wanted to do is kind of throw an idea out there. Here's the list of these 90 standards that are part of what should be taught in kindergarten. And he was essentially looking for something, and hopefully I'll express this well enough. Yes, this should definitely be taught. It's developmentally appropriate. It's developmentally appropriate for some students. No, it should not. And then he had a fourth column, which was in the presentation, which I apologize for us not having, which allowed for a remark or a comment.
the other thing that bothers
And-
me too.
Excuse me for a second. And those 4 criteria would in effect be commented upon for each of the questions that would be on the survey. So, and specifically and again, the board is essentially gathering, or this committee is essentially gathering the information for presentation to the teachers, and not making a decision on this item should be taught or not.
Correct.
So I don't think we're trying to,
But I'm also concerned that Dr. Moseley might have a different opinion, or might want to direct his people to do this themselves if there's a recommendation of the board that they need to review these standards to see if there are stuff. But I don't think it should come directly from the board, telling them, you know, the survey questions. I just don't.
Ms.
I'm really concerned about how this is going to be perceived by our teachers. And I know you don't like that word, but micromanaging is I think pretty disastrous. I think we're in a difficult situation right now. I think that Dr. Moseley will come on board, and if we approach him at the time and say, you know, we think that our curriculum committee thinks that they should be reviewing these standards, and if he feels that they should be, then it's his responsibility to see that it gets done, not the board. And we've talked about this many, many times. I don't see my function here as a board member to be telling them how to conduct their business, so.
Right now I'm the messenger.
Yep, I know you are.
Okay, so let's keep that in mind. Secondly, I think the committee, like a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago now, probably at least 2 or 3 meetings ago, we sat here, it continued into the next meeting. We really had a brainstorming session essentially to identify things that the committee would be putting on its future agenda items. And Mr. Boucher just reminded us, thankfully, we're from 24 down to 20. So we're making some progress. And I do recall, if I'm correct, that this review of the kindergarten and other curricula were part of that list. So this isn't newly generated, I'll call it recent, but I won't call it new. And I appreciate your concern about the staff's potential feedback. But the point is what I'm trying to say is there has been input to get it on the list. He's pursuing one of the things that are on the list. And with the timeliness that we're implementing a brand new program next year, again, channeling Dr. Mortaki here, that it would be, now is the good time to have the review.
What new program are we?
It's called kindergarten in all the schools.
Well, we have full-time curriculum right now. It's not gonna be,
Well, it's new to, what, 10 schools? Or sorry, 7
Seven.
schools. Doris and then George.
I think he wants a bottom-up survey, and this, I think, is just the bare bones of it. I think to get the bottom-up aspect, you want to contact the teachers. If the curriculum folks want to help manage this, if they want to either take the survey or help us interpret the survey, to broaden it, that's very reasonable. I think what Dr. Murtaki is trying to do, and what I would support doing, is looking at the 90 standards that we have for math and ELA, and after using them for a couple of years, just confirm that we're on the right track, what's working, what's not working, what works for some of our students but not all. Just to indicate, to help the board understand which or what component of the current standards are a success and which ones are maybe an impediment for learning. If they're all great, then we have no problem. If there's a few that they might have problems with, then maybe we tweak it. Then there were 4 other questions that were just board questions, whether about recess and about lunch and half-day, full-day, and the iReady testing. Those were questions that the board had, and it would help advise and instruct the board on policymaking going forward. If we're going to do a survey, hit up all the questions. So the board had the 4 questions, plus the review of the standards. So this just is a mechanism for taking the 90 standards and saying, okay, we've done them for a couple of years, let's get the feedback. When Dr. Moseley comes, he can add or subtract to what the feedback is. I mean, there's no decision-making, it's just collecting data, and then later trying to figure out, with the help of the curriculum and maybe Dr. Moseley, what would come next.
doesn't iReady, can't you get that information from iReady to show what has been a problem? If you have one competency or one thing that's a problem across the board, then you might say, well, that might be inappropriate for this age group. But, I mean, can't we get that kind of data from iReady?
I know you're looking at me as the chair, and I don't know if iReady results in what Kathy does are the exact answer to get there. That's a question I would ask the administration to respond to. Can anybody reply to Ms. Van Twyver's question?
What was the question? Can you get?
Well, iReady, I mean, that program can tell the teacher what standards the student has
Yes, right.
dressed.
So right.
And if you have a whole class that has the same standard as a problem, I mean, wouldn't you look at that and say, well, maybe this is not
You can look
appropriate for
and see.
this age group, or whatever?
I guess
Couldn't
that's
you
kind
get
of-
some of that information from
Yeah,
iReady?
you certainly could. You could look at what the standards were. I guess that's why I was kind of going back, but some of these standards that you're going to teach in grade K are going to affect some of the standards you're going to try to meet in 1 and 2. So you have to be really careful about just addressing it with a survey. You
Wow.
really have to curriculum map it. So if you're having issues, there are sometimes you may look at a certain standard and maybe it has to be taught in grade 1. I don't know because it's too difficult. So you could do that. Surveys,
But if it's across the whole district,
Sure.
that one, and students don't seem to be getting it across the whole district, to me, that would indicate that there's something wrong with the standard.
yep, absolutely. Yep, so you could do it that way too.
I do have a list here. Mr. Farrington's been patiently waiting.
Sorry to interrupt on that.
That's what I'm known for. Thank you.
Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah. Some of this has already been said, but let me just repeat it. Looking at Dr. Murataki's email in there, there's a premise that I don't think is correct. His objective is to improve our full-day kindergarten first-year experience. This isn't our first-year experience with kindergarten. We have had multiple years of experience with full-day kindergarten. To me, the logical way to do this, not get the board involved in trying to get the teachers to take a position on every single standard that's in Common Core, is you go and you sit down, as I heard it discussed at an earlier curriculum meeting between Dr. Murataki and Mr. Boucher. You sit down, all of your teachers, and you have an exchange between the people who've been doing this full-day kindergarten for years and the other teachers, and have an exchange of experiences, what they find is working well for them, what hasn't been working well, recess time, play time, how the day is used. You look at iReady that has been talked about, because you can't tamper with this curriculum at the kindergarten and not expect that it's going to impact first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade, as whether it's language arts or math, because if you pull something out, there's going to have an effect downstream. This is starting at the wrong end of the process here. It shouldn't be starting at the board. It should be starting with the teachers in the class that have been working in the classrooms, and find out what they have been doing and has been successful. That's it.
I think Dr. Murataki was putting out something as a starting point to get the conversation to the point where those meetings.
No, I understand, but I don't think the conversation should start here. My point is, the conversation should start at the kindergarten level with the kindergarten teachers who've been doing this, not bringing in opinions and goals, people trying to undo Common Core, any of that other stuff. The politics and all of this should be left at the front door, and it should be comments or discussion about educational issues. How do we deal with these students? What is the best way to approach these various things? Which areas are difficult? Which areas you may find that the teachers aren't using some of these standards. They may have made a determination in their own realistic application of working with these students that this isn't an effective way to do it, or this isn't the best sequence in which to do it. But for us to start at this level, I think is the wrong place. Go to your teachers and ask them what they've been doing.
But, and really, I think you're.
Not through a survey, not through some
well,
structure, not
all I'm
through
saying
some
is that's how
survey.
he's trying to do it.
No,
He's-
I understand.
He's looking for data. He's a data guy.
I understand, but I think that, there's a lot of other things that work in this data gathering. Like I say, we're trying to get teachers to come forward with an assessment of each one of the standards that is in Common Core. And we know that politically, there are people who are opposed to Common Core and want to undo Common Core in any way they can. I think, as I said, leave the politics at the door. Let the teachers sit down and discuss what they have experienced over their years of experience working with these kids full day. Let them sit down and talk with the half-day teachers. And I think the half-day teachers are going to say, wow, I've got a full day to do the things I've been trying to get done in a half a day. Boy, can I be creative, the things that I've wanted to do. And I think can be some really good dialogue if the board and other people at this level will just stay out of it and let them have that first bite at the apple, if you will.
If I may,
Sure.
I just want to, I kind of want to follow up on that, because I think it's consistent with the intent where Dr. Murataki would like to get to, which is that there is dialogue by the teachers with the administration. I think he would like to see a survey piece or the results of the discussions that the administration might have. I think, I mean, again, I don't want to, I'll just say it this way. I think he'd be pleased to know that the administration has taken upon the task of reaching out to the half-day teachers that are currently doing the full day and the folks that will be, that are identified for next year, to talk with them about these I think I think at the end of the day, his preference is, please, administration, please review the standards and see if you're really got what you need and kind of document the results. I think that's where he wants to get to. And his way of priming the pump was to have this kind of a conversation.
Well, if I could, and my recollection of a previous meeting of this committee was that Mr. Boucher and I sat at the back of the room, and Dr. Murataki were having a conversation. It seemed to be along the lines of what I'm talking about. Mr. Boucher had indicated that he was going to bring all the kindergarten teachers together, and Dr. Murataki seemed to be kind of in his wheelhouse of what he was looking at. And then other members of the committee got involved in saying, well, we need to do this from the surveys, from the committee level and from the board. And I'm saying, no, let them do this first step and let them come back and report to the either this committee or the full board and say, we've had this and we've had some good conversations. If the committee is interested in what's going on, let them come back and report on what they're doing. But let them do it. Don't try to influence it with this top-down push for information. Just give them the freedom to be teachers and exchange ideas and experiences.
So if I can follow up on that concept with Mr. Boucher, what is the status on that?
We've had 2 planning meetings for the summer session. We put out a survey to staff to gauge their interest in participating, and 31 of the 40 have agreed that they'd like to attend.
Okay.
It'll be an all-day session, but you can do the math yourself. 31 people, you have a mix of both full and half-day people.
Sure. Okay. So, going down the list, Dr. Brown, you are on the list. I have you down, Ms. Van Twyver is next, but I think you jumped the line.
I said my speech.
Okay.
I jumped it, yeah.
Dr. Brown?
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaufman. I think it's important to correct the record because Mrs. Hohensee said a minute ago that a number of the board asked these questions. I would posit that these questions were asked of the board and they were answered at the board level. I can look at a number of these. I'll pick one. The district should provide half-day, full-day, half-day and full-day preference kindergarten. That answer was given unequivocally at the board level. So why you would ask the staff that is puzzling to me. The same can be said regarding the recess before lunch question. It was, again, asked and answered at the board level, and Dr. Murataki, I believe, is the one who said that needs to be a building-based decision in response to the staff. So why you put that out again, that's settled. So I don't know why you would, again, ask questions that the board has already decided.
Mr. Fred?
Me?
You had your hand up earlier.
I must have lost my train of thought. So
Okay.
I'm just going to somebody else. Must
Ms.
be-
Sorensen?
And I appreciate what you're saying, and I know we have discussed them, and Dr. Murataki did perhaps weigh in on the recess issue, but there was never a vote at the board on any of these issues. The motions were never brought up. Before the board would even dare to take a motion on any of these issues, we would want information from our teachers. And I think that was the attitude, rather than top-down, it was bottom-up. I would like to, I'd like to make a motion, if that's all right. I'd like to move to use the handout we have, which has the 90 standards, and the PowerPoint, which is only online, that's, to develop a survey for the kindergarten teachers. The administration or the curriculum specialist work together to get that out and come back to us using the iReady results that Mrs. Twyver suggested, because that will help inform where there are problems or there are no problems. It was a good suggestion, and present that to the board of where we stand. That way it's bottom up, that Dr. Murataki wants, it expands it a little bit more, that the administration wants, and they come back and have a discussion, and who knows where we go from there. But I would like these 4 questions in with the 90 standards that are on the handout, because it will help me as a board member, and I think the rest of the board, if we ever get to a vote on any of these issues. I do not believe this is political, as Mr. Farrington said. I'm not scoping out and saying that I do or don't like any of these standards for, the Common Core. In particular, I want to be informed by our teachers who have used them, and then I want that to be helped and interpreted by our curriculum
We don't have a
specialists.
second yet, do we?
No, and I was gonna ask if you could
Fine.
write down, well, no, just
I
write
did.
down the motion so we can,
I did write it down.
oh,
Scribbled it
so I
down.
could
Then-
actually
Then I
include it.
expanded upon it as I talked through it.
Okay, so could you repeat what you want the motion to be, please?
Move to use the handout and the PowerPoint that Dr. Murataki presented by email to develop a survey for kindergarten teachers and have a curriculum specialist present the results of this survey, and then along with the iReady results, their interpretation of it, the hard survey and their data in addition to it, and interpret all the data that will come back to the board, to the committee, and see where we stand at that point.
Is there a second? I will second that motion, but I do need the text of it.
It's kind of a long one.
I know, and I'm
It
gonna
is.
see if,
It is, it's on the very bottom.
okay, well, you realize you're not getting this sheet of paper back, right?
I'll write it out better if you'd like me to, but that's what, and I'll put it on a blank sheet of paper.
Why don't you do that,
Because
and in the
it's
meantime,
not-
since we have a second, we can discuss it before we vote on it. And I am mindful of trying to leave by 7:30 if possible. Mr. Fredricksen?
You brought up, the survey, you brought up a couple times the iReady. You made a decision not to use iReady in kindergarten next year,
Oh, good.
right?
Right.
Wasn't that was already, that's what
That's
you had
right.
voted for, so I don't know, your motion doesn't really, I mean, you probably have to relook at it.
I'd be happy to strike it.
No, I'm just trying to tell you that you made a decision as a board to take kindergarten out of the iReady, so it's no longer being purchased, so I mean, even
We still have some
number
results.
4 there, what's
Yeah.
that?
Mr. Boucher said we had some from the Title I schools. I know we have some results from the iReady. Okay, only one school. I'm fine to strike it
That's
out.
not going to give you a good idea.
Okay, then we strike that out.
I just
Well,
know
no, it
number
wouldn't,
4
because
too.
it's not district-wide,
No.
or even 5-wide, however many kindergartens are full-time.
And for discussion, I would recommend that you put that the survey is being developed by the administration,
Okay, hold back.
because that's, for me, is missing from your
Okay.
motion. Anybody have a, Mr. Farrington, do you have your hand up?
Yes.
Okay.
First, I feel compelled to ask, is it just coincidence that Dr. Murataki's on his way to Finland tonight?
I didn't send him.
The land of delayed kindergarten and
Yeah, that's
all that.
interesting.
And the other one, I thought I heard, this board has never taken a vote on full-day kindergarten?
Only in the budget,
The budget.
Oh, okay.
but never in this committee. Never was it discussed in this committee or brought forth to this committee.
So which
In the last-
maybe the
since I've been
chairman
on the
has
board.
fallen down on the job.
No.
Not to say.
But the full board did take a position.
Yes, it
There's two distinct different, I think there's two things. One is, yes, the board did take a position at budget, but
And the
this,
vote on that was
6-2?
6-2?
and it is also true
And the
that
two no
this,
votes were?
these two people
Okay.
here,
And
Okay.
that,
for the record,
during that
and
conversation.
excuse me, I'm speaking, if I may, and that this committee, as curriculum and evaluation, that topic since I've been on the board for the last year and a half, or whatever, has never come to this committee or ever having been discussed or recommended to the board that it be included in the budget or that we even implement the kindergarten. It kind of skipped the committee and went straight to budget. And that's also true for the record. Dr. Brown?
So I'd be happy to address that, Mr. Kaufman, because initiatives or programs that we have in the school district already would not go through a committee. And I think that the board has been very decisive on the issue of all-day kindergarten. And people who are unsuccessful in that venue are trying yet again to get through a survey, something they were unsuccessful in getting at the board level.
I think Dr. Moritaki's intent here is good. And it was very visible and very public, and he's explained it before that he wants to do this for all levels, all grades, and look at the curriculum. That's no secret to anybody who's watched these meetings or attended them. So here's a way to get that discussion going. He started with kindergarten.
So why are we including the first page then? That does not pertain to what you just said.
I didn't write those. Those were given to the committee. Actually, if we would have had Dr. Moritaki's presentation, doesn't have them in the same format. He presents them differently. If I had them, I would have shared those with you. I don't. But he did want a committee made up of teachers and administrators, and obviously curriculum specialists are part of the people who would do this, is to look at this critically and evaluate it. That's what Dr. Moritaki's asking for. So to move this forward and to set up the survey that he requested, I think it's a good idea. I'm interested that so many people see the other side of it, that we're trying to destroy. Kindergarten's going to happen. The only way I think kindergarten might not happen is if Fred T. Boom's lawsuit against the city cuts off the funding and we have to look at alternative sources because we'd be $1 million short in our budget. But other than that, kindergarten, full-day kindergarten's a done deal. I get that. I'm not here to stop it. I'm here to ensure that it's the best kindergarten it could be. So I'm sorry that some people think perhaps I have some other agenda. I really don't. I accept the fact that kindergarten's coming, but I also support Dr. Moritaki's intent here to make sure that the kindergarten that we put forward is what the teachers and the curriculum specialists believe is the best approach. That's what his intent is. Someone have their hand up?
I take offense to these accusations, not just by Dr. Brown, but Mr. Farrington, that we have a political agenda or that we're trying to stop things. That's the farthest from the truth in this committee. Dr. Murataki put in House Bill 155 to fund all-day kindergarten. He's been a strong supporter of all-day kindergarten. He is helping with this review of the standards and these 4 questions because he wants the best kindergarten for our students. This is how his position all along. I believe I put 2 questions of these 4 additionals and he put 2. I'm not positive, but that's my recollection, because these were outstanding issues that we want bottom-up feedback from. If we get results back from teachers that we didn't anticipate, that will help inform us moving forward. I do not think that anybody is trying to derail it. We are trying to get a better and more detailed and more precise understanding of where our teachers stand on all these issues from the bottom up, so we don't just make blind top-down decisions. And
Mr. Kaufman?
Mr. Twyrer?
Ms. O'Hensey, I think you have stated on many media that you are against Common Core. So I don't think you're impartial in this at all. So I take a big exception to your comment that you're not trying to undermine this.
And if I might, Mr. Kaufman, as recently as our budget presentation to the Alderman's Budget Committee, you stood up in public comment and blasted all-day kindergarten. So to in any way represent that you are just trying to get feedback from the bottom up is not only disingenuous, it is downright unethical.
May I respond to that?
Please.
Okay, I spoke to the Board of Aldermen. I also spoke in the legislature. Like Dr. Murataki, there are concerns that the Common Core standards for the primary grades are not developmentally appropriate. That I have expressed. I do not want to expand a program before we have a thorough review of the standards that we have. Because from what research I've done, they are not developmentally appropriate for all students. Some students flourish in kindergarten no matter what you put in front of them. Some do not. I have not told the aldermen that in any way the 6-2 vote, there's no way I could overturn it, but I did present my opinion that they're developmentally inappropriate and that should be addressed before we expand it. I'm not having that option. It's going to be expanded. I'm just trying to make sure that we review this so we can do the best for our students.
Mr. Boucher.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments. You know, I'm a short timer here. I've heard this described 3 or 4 times now as a bottoms-up survey. It is not. It's a top-down situation. Board members have concerns about kindergarten. They want to do a survey. That's the flip of where it should be. Curriculum initiatives should originate in the classroom, not in the boardroom. That's my firm belief, how it's always been for me in my experience. The other thing I will tell you is that the curriculum department has no interest in writing, editing, or administering a survey at this time. I don't think it would be beneficial to the district, to the program. You know, you guys are the curriculum committee. If you want to create a survey and see where it goes, it's up to you, but I'm really not interested in participating in this at this time.
Is that because, well, let's say a motion left this committee and went to the board and was subsequently approved at the board requesting the survey, would you still not do it?
I won't be here at that time.
So it's part of the plan to kind of just delay, not include the information
I'm not
that's
delaying anything.
Hold on a second. So part of the plan was not to have the presentation that Dr. Murataki requested
There was
here?
no request to do a presentation here.
Sure there was.
Not for me, there wasn't.
There was an email that he sent to you specifically.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Forwarded to the committee was what I read. Can I finish?
Yeah, sure.
We have an obligation to our staff to implement the curriculum that we have at hand. We have 20 people who are going to be starting a brand-new view of kindergarten in a few months. To me, this is pulling the rug out from under those people. Am I teaching this? Am I not teaching this? Is this important? Is it not important? Is it appropriate or is it not appropriate? This is the time to be asking those questions of those people. I'm unclear about who the audience is for the survey. I'm unclear about the content of the survey and its origin. It's just, there's too many questions at this point.
Ms. Holency.
Thank you. Again, I'm disappointed. I personally asked in January, January 25th, when the budget came out, that this should go immediately to curriculum to give you time, to give everyone time to review this, because that has always been my position. I want to make sure we have developmentally appropriate standards. Dr. Murataki echoed that concern right from the beginning. He didn't say, Mr. Boucher, please put it on the schedule for such and such a date, but he echoed the concern that he would accept it in curriculum and he wanted to discuss it. So maybe, I'm just disappointed that we can't have a discussion and we can't get information from our teachers. I don't know how else to do it.
May I
Go
ask
ahead.
you a question? As the person who seconded that motion, I'd be willing to withdraw it, and I would ask you to withdraw it. And let's just bring this up. We'll speak to Dr. Murataki. This was originally his proposal. Let him bring it up at our next meeting. By then, maybe the short timers won't be here. Sadly, and I only have the first sentence of where he said, Mr. Boucher, please have this presentation be available to be projected during the curriculum meeting. So he did ask for the presentation to be available and did ask you to project it, which it did not. So to that end, I don't think we're gonna get much value out of a continued conversation.
I understand what you're suggesting, but if it's gonna go to the full board for discussion, you might as well vote to recommend it and put it on the agenda. And then it's under the curriculum, and Dr. Murtaki will be back on the 30th, and he can discuss it or withdraw it at that point. But otherwise, it goes to new business, it's at the end of the meeting when people are tired. I think we just go forward with the motion, and if he wants to withdraw it at that point, that'd be fine with me.
I would ask, I kind of looked at the text of it, and I have some changes.
Okay,
So to that extent, I would ask that you withdraw it, and I will replace the motion.
okay, then I withdraw.
Thank you. So,
Move to adjourn.
I move to request that the administration develop a survey for kindergarten teachers, reviewing the 90 standards and report the results of the survey to the Curriculum and Evaluation Committee before the end of the current school year. So I ask that, can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, please, and then I'll call on you.
Before you vote, is there an answer to those two questions? Who is the audience for the survey? And what is the source of the 90 standards that you refer to?
You were asking the kindergarten teachers, and if you want to expand it, if that's too narrow, that would be fine. Address, like, give us the kindergarten teachers' results and then administrators, that's fine, as long as they're labeled, so we can understand and interpret the results. The 90 questions are what we got online. They're the standards that we're using, from my understanding. I would like to ask that you amend your motion, Mr. Kaufman, to add those 4 questions that Dr. Murataki put in. I would like, those are board
Well, that-
questions. Can we add the 4 questions plus the?
Those are
The
not
90s.
board questions, Doris, let's
Okay.
be real, they're
Okay,
your
excuse me.
questions.
You're right, the adjective is wrong. Committee questions.
Wait a minute.
They're
They're your questions.
They're
They're
your
being-
questions that you were unsuccessful in getting past in the last 6 months. So now you want to try yet another way
As far as I
to
know,
advance
yes.
your agenda,
I have
not the
not
board's
made,
agenda.
I have not made a motion, okay. But I made 2 of them, Dr. Murataki made 2 of them. I would like those included if that's so possible.
Which are Dr. Murataki's questions?
I don't recall. I thought I
I'm sorry,
So you would know
hold
which
on.
2 are yours,
Stop,
so which
please.
2 are his?
please. Okay, we're over our time. I think it's a good time to end. We have a motion on the floor. I understand your intent to want to update the questions. Right now, there is no survey. I think when we get the survey, the questions will be there.
Those 4 questions will be there?
You can certainly submit, see,
Oh, you mean at the full board?
yeah, and deal with it then, because,
Well, the only difference is then they won't be in the packet. You're talking them verbally instead of looking at them in the packet. It's easier for board members to see.
well, here's the way, if I can just, let me be a little prophetic here. The administration will speak against these. I'm sad that our administrators for the last 2 months, that they're going to be here, and I'll just say willfully ignored, or at least one of them, a request to project this on the screen so we could have had a discussion about the format and look at the nature of the questions that Dr. Murataki put forward. I just,
Okay,
I see this as something that Dr. Moseley should have his hands in.
Absolutely.
And I think the board will consider that when this does come forward, if it's a recommendation from this committee.
Move the question.
Move the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions, or just the 3 of
There's
us?
just 3 of us.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned. Time is 7:39.